Good afternoon. How you doing, Roger?
Hey, Lorenzo, it's always a pleasure to see you, my friend.
Likewise, brother, likewise. So we are here on episode 2 of the podcast, and today our topic is your unique approach and niche business model. So let's jump into that, Roger. On the last podcast, we discussed your backstory, and how you got started in real estate investing.
Hmm.
And today I'd like to do a deep dive into what you do exactly with this business model. So we're going to cover what makes this specific model unique, and more specifically, what all the craze is that I'm hearing about our particular model. So the first question that I'm going to just jump into right now. So my first question is exactly that. What do you do that makes your business so unique?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's actually a couple of things I think, two in fact, that really come to top of mind. Number one, we are real estate investors. We own and operate a private equity real estate investment firm. And private equity just means it's not public market, it's all done privately. So, number one, we're not agents. We don't have to be agents. Our clients do not have to be real estate agents to do what we do. We do everything as the owner. But what makes us different from most real estate investors is number one, we are not traditionally minded real estate investors. Traditionally minded real estate investors, they buy at retail and they finance, they go into debt and they rent. So we do not buy at retail and rent. That's not what we do, because when you do that, it creates a couple of concerns. Number one, when you buy investment property and you go to the bank to get a loan, it's considered a commercial loan. And with a commercial loan, it requires 20% down. So just on a $100,000 house, that's $20,000 down payment. That's your capital outlay, $20,000 down. I mean, if you're making $200 a door, which is the goal for most investors when they rent is $200 a door, how many months is that? What's that? 100 months before you're even going to break even. That's a long time just to break even. So 20% down. Then number two, you're signing for the debt at the bank. You're personally signing that promissory note, that mortgage, that deed of trust based on what state you're in. And so you're going into debt. That debt is on your credit report and it reflects as such. So you're having to put 20% down your capital outlay. You're signing personally for the debt, your personal promise to pay, and it ties up your credit because you're using your credit to acquire these assets. And no matter how good your credit is, at some point that credit will be maxed out after you do a certain number of deals. So the three biggest issues, number one, 20% down your capital outlay. Number two, signing for the debt, your personal promise to pay. Number three, tying up your credit, limiting your play. So we are not traditional real estate investors. We are creative real estate transaction engineers. We acquire through creative acquisition strategies, not having to put 20% down, not going into debt, not tying up our credit. And I could speak for several more minutes on that topic, but that's primarily number one, what makes us different. The second thing that makes us different as we work with clients and colleagues across the country, as we currently are because of our expansion model, something that makes us different. Like I've been to many, many seminars in my 22 years, and each seminar we go to, they either have a specialty they're teaching or they have a package of information you can buy. Then it's up to you to go home and unwrap the cellophane and learn it and apply it. But what we've done, I've taken my 22 years of experience and education, and I've taken all this good information that we've assembled over the years and put together a solid package. Now, what we offer is not just a package where you go and put it together and learn and assemble the pieces. These pieces are 100% assembled. We provide step-by-step processes for everything that someone needs to know to be successful in this business. We provide every component needed for a successful replication of our model in their market. I mean, everything. There's nothing that we leave out. Plus, in addition to supplying the course or the material, we also supply the coaching and the mentoring through our online community. And when you have both coupled together, man, it just propels you through that learning curve, and it makes your chances of success so much more likely because you've kind of got a dual component going on with the course and the coaching. So, I mean, just really briefly, I could dive into each of those two variables deeper, but those are just a couple of the things that make what we do different, our business model different, and the way we teach and apply it and help others, it's different.
So let's start with that first aspect, buying creatively, if not traditionally. So, well, first question that comes to mind is why do so many investors still buy traditionally? And do you personally like not buy any deals traditionally? Like, do you never go to a bank to get a mortgage under any circumstance?
Well, I wouldn't say under any circumstance, and I'll do my best to circle back around to that. So help me do that if I fail to. But you know, most people that are in real estate business, they follow what has happened before them. They're on the road that's been paved before them. And most of them understand just a traditional path. You find an asset, you pay retail or close to retail for it, and then you go to the bank and you get a loan, and then you rent the home. So when I got started, I did not have the ability. I did not have 20% down. I did not have the credit to be able to go and apply for a loan, and certainly wasn't interested in doing all that and jumping through all those hoops and going into debt just to make $200 a month per door. So luckily for me, the people that I learned from, my mentors, they didn't follow that path. They were very, very creative. So I was taught from the onset how to acquire assets creatively. And there are many different creative acquisition strategies, and you can actually strategy stack. You can actually use a couple different strategies to put a deal together on one asset. But yeah, so we teach primarily 7 creative acquisition strategies. And let me see if I can get them right. So we do seller financing, where the seller becomes the bank. We do subject to, whenever you take over someone else's loan. And I want to do future podcasts where we spend the entire podcast just on each one of these acquisition disciplines because they're worth diving into. So seller
Absolutely.
financing, subject to, sandwich lease option, which is a really incredible acquisition strategy. We have a case study where we made over $100,000 on an asset that we didn't even own. We just controlled it through the lease. We didn't have a dollar in it. We didn't own it. We just controlled it through the lease and made $104,515 on a sandwich lease option. Then there's a pure option. There are short sales, defaulted notes, and fix and flips. So those are the 7 strategies. And again, there have been instances when we have acquired an asset and we've used 2 strategies and strategies stacked to be able to get the seller what they needed and wanted, plus give us an opportunity to buy that we needed to buy so that we could be successful and profitable. So creative real estate investing is just that. I mean, the word creative, one of the definitions of the word creative means to evolve something already in existence. So that's what we've done. We're an evolution from the old ways of acquiring assets into a revolution of the new ways of acquiring assets. And this model, like it did for me, I did not have the down payment, I did not have the credit. This model eliminates the hurdles, keeping the average person from acquiring real estate assets. And so, I mean, creative real estate is the way to go.
Right. So there's 7 acquisition strategies. If you had to go over just one
Mm-hmm.
to give a quick teaser to the audience, which one would you
Man, that's an
go over right now?
that's an easy answer. A couple of them I really love, but my absolute favorite way to acquire an asset, and this is the same for the clients across the country.
And
It's called,
we're talking best case scenario. This is like the best type of deal that you could
I,
possibly get.
I love to acquire assets this way. It's a subject to acquisition. And subject to basically means that you're acquiring the asset subject to the underlying debt. So we're acquiring the asset, but the underlying debt stays in place with the seller's lender and in the seller's name. So we own the deed, but the seller still owns the debt. Now, why in the world would a seller do that? So sellers what they do, they will deed the house to you as an act to rid themselves of the source of stress they associate with the property. So we take ownership through the deed, subject to the underlying debt remaining in place in the seller's name and with the seller's lender. And there's been a number of reasons. There are a number of reasons that sellers will do that. Life-changing events, divorce, loss of job, job relocation, inherited property. There's a whole host of reasons that sellers do that. And we've done each one of those reasons multiple times. And the benefit for the seller, it immediate stress debt relief, whatever the stress point is with that asset, it gets them out from up underneath that. Often it saves their credit because sometimes they're behind facing foreclosure. We reinstate, get it out of foreclosure, and continue to make monthly payments. Now their credit is inching up each time we make an on-time payment. And it just basically allows them to move on with life. So whenever they deed you the house, again, we own the asset as if we paid cash for it. But that debt still encumbers the house, but that debt stays in the seller's name with the seller's bank. We just step in and start making those monthly payments. That's why we say create wealth in real estate without creating debt. We're creating wealth because we own the asset and we're enjoying the income and the revenue from that asset. Matter of fact, there's 3 income streams the way we sell. We receive a down payment, monthly cash flow, and back in equity. In other words, we receive money now, money monthly, and money later. So we own the deed, they own the debt. That debt still encumbers the property. If we don't pay the debt, if we don't make the payment, well, then the bank has the right.
Hey, Roger, I think that your audio just went out.
How are we doing now?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, that can just get cut out. So you were saying?
So we acquire the asset, we own the deed, and the seller still owns the debt. So if we don't make the payment and the bank forecloses, it doesn't affect our credit, it affects the seller's credit. But guys, we cannot let that happen because we made a promise to the seller that we're going to make that payment. They're trusting us to make that payment. So if we don't make the payment, it doesn't affect our credit, it affects theirs. So we got to make the payment. Number one, it's the right thing to do. You know, legally and contractually, we're not obligated, but morally and ethically, we are obligated. So we have to make the payment. Now, if we don't make the payment, yeah, it doesn't affect our credit. But if we don't make the payment, we then lose our asset. So we're going to make the payment. Guys, if you do subject to acquisitions, you have to make the payment. If you find yourself in a subject to where you're having a difficult time making the payment, please get a hold of us. We'll consider partnering with you on that deal just to preserve the asset, preserve the name in the industry, and the acquisition strategy. So subject to is by far my favorite strategy because when the seller deeds you a house, they're literally giving you their house. It's a free house.
So
And so
question, the deed, is that attached to the mortgage or are those two totally different entities?
it's actually both. They are 2 different documents, 2 different processes. So we own the house through the deed, but we give the bank a mortgage or a deed of trust. So they have an interest in the property. So if we don't pay, they can exercise that interest and take the property back. So 2 distinct differences between the deed and the debt, but they run congruently. They are absolutely tied together.
How would you define the deed? Like this concept of a deed, what is it?
The deed is ownership, and the debt is what's owed. So the deed is who owns it. Whoever controls the deed and has the deed, they're the owner.
So, okay, so me, the seller, let's say I'm the homeowner who is going to deed my property to you,
Mm-hmm.
has possession of the deed under my name, but I owe the bank the debt for the mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
So even though that's the case, the bank is not the owner of the property.
No, the bank is not the owner through the mortgage or through the deed of trust, depending on what state you're in. Some states issue mortgages, some states issue deeds of trust. That gives the bank a small interest in the property. Therefore, if you fail to perform, their recourse is they can take their small ownership and take that property back. So no, you own it, but there's still debt encumbered in it. If you don't pay it, yeah, the bank's gonna come take it back. Their recourse is to take the property back.
Okay. How do banks feel about subject to deals?
Well, banks probably would not like it. Matter of fact, I know they don't like it, and this is why. Let's say that you qualified for a house and you live in it for a couple of years and you have some life-changing event and you can no longer afford it. You just need to move on with life. And you find me and we work out a acquisition to where I'm buying the house subject to that debt. Well, the bank qualified you. They qualified you. You're the one that went through the loan approval process. They don't know who I am. So when you deed me the house, they don't know who I am. They don't know if I have the ability to service the debt. So they are going to not like the fact that you deeded that property away because they didn't qualify me. So in every mortgage after FHA after December of 1988, VA after January of 89. Before that, we could do a non-qualifying assumption. I could send my name, phone number, and address to your bank and assume your loan without any qualification. They don't do that anymore. There are no longer any non-qualifying assumptions. You can still qualify to assume, which means you go through that whole process as if you were the original buyer. But without the non-qualifying assumption, the bank doesn't know me. So if you give your house to me, they're not going to like it. So in every mortgage now, after December of 88, FHA, January of 89, VA,
Mhm.
in every mortgage, every deed of trust, there's called a due on sale clause. Therefore, if you deed your property to me, you have violated that due on sale clause. Now, you haven't broken the law, you haven't committed a crime, you just violated a clause in your mortgage, but that clause has some teeth because now the bank has the right, but not the obligation, but they've got the right to call the entire loan due. And so that due on sale clause is in every mortgage, every deed of trust today,
So
and they give the bank some teeth.
a transfer of deed constitutes a sale.
A transfer of deed, absolutely, it activates that due on sale clause. You're in violation of that clause now.
Ah, okay. So how do you mitigate risk for
Well,
subject to acquisitions?
luckily, back in 1982, I think they were senators, Garn and St. Germain, drafted and lobbied and passed the Garn St. Germain Federal Depository Institutions Act of 1982. One of the components of that act is it will allow sellers to place their property in trust for asset protection or estate planning. So what we do every time we acquire an asset, especially a subject to asset, we create a trust. Now, we're not talking about a living trust or a Massachusetts business trust. We're simply talking about a land trust. A land trust is simply a vehicle for holding title to real property. It's not even an entity. You don't have to file it with the IRS. You do not get an EIN or a TIN number. It's simply a paper trust, a vehicle for holding title to real property. So by placing that property into a trust, having the sellers place their property into a trust, and then we acquire the trust, they have a veil of protection against the due on sale clause because now they're under the federal protection of the Garn St. Germain Act.
See. So they're involved in the trust that we make with them?
They are involved in the trust. Initially, when we create the trust, it's their trust and they're the beneficiary. As we
Ah,
go through the process, one of the documents they sign at closing, we create a trust. The trust now owns the property, and the sellers are the beneficiary of the trust. So they're at the bottom of the funnel. A few minutes later, they sign a document called an assignment and quitclaim of beneficial interest. Now the trust owns the property, and we own the trust because they've assigned the beneficial interest to us. But it's still on public record. We have that trust in existence that provides that shield of protection against the due on sale clause. And listen, the truth of the matter is banks have the right, but not the obligation to call that loan due. As long as that payment's current, that bank does not care really. They are probably not going to foreclose on that asset. They have enough trouble with loans in default already. They are not going to put a performing loan in default just to flex their muscles, so to speak. So that's a really cool component. They have the right, but not the obligation. They probably will not because they are not going to put a performing loan in default. They've already got way too many other loans in default than to put a performing loan in default.
so what would you tell to somebody who just heard about subject to for the first time and now they're skeptical, thinking to themselves, well, a bank ultimately has the right to call the loan due. And
Hmm.
I can lose my asset that I put the down payment on, that I've been paying monthly payments on, paying interest on.
Hmm.
Like that's possible. That is a possible situation, even if the property is in a trust, correct? They can still lose the asset.
That is correct. That's something that they need to be aware of. But I've been doing this for 22 years, and I have met people across the country. As I speak across the country, I've met people across the country, and I have not heard one single story, not one, where the bank called the loan due. But you do need to be aware of that. And if someone was to ask, hey, that's risky. Why would I do that? Is that even a legal transaction? Matter of fact, I've been asked many times, is that a legal transaction? And this is my response. There's a document at closing called a HUD-1. HUD is Housing Urban Development. That's a federal department. And so a HUD-1, it ledgers the expenses of each side, the seller and the buyer, who's paying what, who brings what to closing, who's making what from the sale. And so on that HUD-1, there's a whole bunch of line items. Well, line 203 and line 503 specifically say on a HUD-1, existing loans taken subject to. So on the federal document, there's a line item for a subject to acquisition. So it's legal and permissible as far as the law goes. The banks just don't like it because of the due on sale clause.
Right. I could see why they wouldn't like it because they didn't qualify the new buyer.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. They don't know who we are. They don't know who you are. They don't know if you've got the ability to pay, and they do not like being in that position. And listen, here's the thing. Banks like owning loans. Banks do not like owning real estate. A lot of people think the banker's sitting back doing this, twisting his mustache, just waiting for you not to make the payment so that he can pounce on your home. Guys, banks do not like owning homes. When they foreclose on a home and take it back, that's called an REO, real estate owned. When a bank owns a piece of real estate, that's one of the worst things a bank can have on their books is an REO or real estate owned. And years ago, I haven't checked into this for several years, but years ago, it would affect their ability to loan new money. So if they take back a mortgage, $100,000 mortgage, it's a 7-to-1 regulatory ratio. For every $100,000 they own in real estate, it affects their ability to loan out 700,000. So banks are not sitting here doing this, waiting to pounce on your
Uh-huh.
home. They do not want to own homes. They don't want to own real estate. They want to own loans, performing
Right.
loans.
It hurts their
That's why they're
business.
probably not going to exercise
Yeah,
the option.
that makes sense. Okay. Well, we dove pretty deep into that
Yeah.
one acquisition strategy, and I'm
Yeah.
sure that there's a lot more that we can dive into, but that's not what this specific podcast episode is for. So let's jump into my second question. We're already halfway through pretty much, but Roger, what has fueled your growth thus far? Now, I've heard that you operate in many markets across the nation. What is your niche?
Well, so two different questions there. What's fueled my growth? I think for any of us, my three favorite books outside the Bible are Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, The 13 Steps to Riches, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey, and As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. But they teach Think and Grow Rich. The first step to riches is desire. Now, listen, that book, Think and Grow Rich, I really encourage you to read it. It's a great, great read. Uh, but it's 389 pages, 89,000 words. I've actually rewritten it. I read it 5 times and I rewrote it for my children because you want your children to know what you know, whether it's financially, spiritually, whatever the case is. So I rewrote it for them to 890 or 8,900 words in only 23 pages. So it's just the meat of the matter. So if someone has an interest in reading my Cliff Notes, we still give credit due to the full book. But step number one, let me back up. The book is not about riches, Think and Grow Rich. It's not about riches and getting rich. It's about focused thinking. So the number one step of the 13 steps to riches is desire. We don't get what we want. We get what we desire. Desire is the first fruit of all action. The starting point of all achievement is desire. So what's fueled my growth 22 years ago, when I was 37, 38, was a desire to do something different, do something better to provide for my family because I was working 2 jobs, as we discussed on the last podcast. So what fueled my growth was just desire. And the number one habit of highly effective people is be proactive. So that's what fueled my growth. But again, our niche is just being able to acquire assets creatively so that we don't have to go into debt. We don't have the burden of the debt in our name, but we have the upside of the profit because we own the assets.
Right. So your niche. Let's jump into that.
Our niche is again creative real estate investing. We buy creatively, creative acquisition strategies, creative financing. When we sell very creatively. You know, our model back here, our step homeownership program, there's actually four tiers to that. And so as people engage us, they get everything that we have. So that step homeownership program, there are four tiers. If you want to rent your assets, guys, that's great. The upside of renting your assets is eventually it'll be paid off. You're no longer, you have debt on it, and then your revenue stream goes way up because you're not having to service the debt with the lease income that you're receiving. There's also rent to own, where you help transition people and families from renter to homeowner, regardless of credit or financial past. And again, that's a whole different rabbit hole. And then there's in-house financing. We offer in-house financing for people that want long-term fixed rate permanent financing but cannot qualify with the bank. So there's a whole host of reasons that banks won't work with people. Number one, you have hiccups in the history of your credit. Maybe you're self-employed. Maybe you work for cash, don't show all of your income. So there's a whole host of reasons that banks won't work with people. But these people can sustain their lifestyle. They're paying rent somewhere, but because they can't get a loan, they're stuck in the rental pool and they can't own. So our step home ownership program or our creative financing, specifically the rent to own tier and the in-house financing, we can transition people from renter to homeowner regardless of credit or financial past. So we buy creatively, we sell creatively. Everything we do is privately funded through our private lenders. We buy and trust, so we have complete anonymity. No one knows what we own. And those are, in fact, our four foundational pillars of our real estate model. Another thing that makes us unique and niche is we teach those four foundational pillars: buying, selling, borrowing, and protecting.
Mm. We should dive a bit into each of the step the steps for home ownership.
Man, we can go deep into any topic that you want. You know, I'm so fortunate over my 22 years. I continue to reinvest. Matter of fact, just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Ohio at the National Real Estate Convention. Even after 22 years and the success that I've had, guys, I still invest into my education because you can always learn, you can always advance, and you can always put yourself in a position to where you're up to date on the laws and strategies of what's going on. So yeah, we can go broad and deep and wide. Any direction you want to go on any one of those topics, man, we can dive into any of them at any time. And again, nothing special about me. I've just had a bunch of great mentors. And I have been like a sponge, man. When they speak, I listen and then I go back and I implement. And it's because of those guys, those mentors, and those methods. That's why we've been successful. I was just naive enough to do exactly what they said do. And doggone it if it didn't work. And here I am 22 years later doing business all over the country.
So what do you say? Would you like to dive into the four steps to home ownership today, or should we say that for another episode?
Well, it's really not the four steps of home ownership. It's really more the four steps of create wealth in real estate without creating debt. Again, there's buying, selling, borrowing, and protecting. So these are more the foundational pillars of the business model, not necessarily of home ownership. So forgive me if
Oh,
I
I mean
led you to
selling
think that. Yeah,
regarding the four steps
yeah,
to selling.
yeah. Again,
So,
selling is just one of the four foundational pillars: buying, selling, borrowing, and protecting. So forgive me if I'm not articulating it correctly and I'm confusing you. I
uh,
apologize for that. But it's the
oh,
four foundational pillars of the business model. Or
I'm not
talking
referring to
about
the
these four
pillars.
steps.
Yeah, yeah, those
Oh, I'm
four
sorry.
steps.
Forgive me. Yeah, I'm kind of simple-minded sometimes, and
You're good.
I'm not hearing what you're saying, so forgive me. But yeah, we can dive into that right now. Again, At the bottom tier is rent. If you want to rent your assets, guys, that's great. Now, I don't do rentals. I never
That's
have.
what most people do.
That's what most people
Rentals.
do. And there's
Okay.
nothing wrong with that, guys. The upside of renting is eventually that asset's going to be paid for. And now that rent check you get every month, there's no underlying debt. And so now that 1,000 you receive, instead of having to pay 800 out, there's no more 800 because that debt has been paid off through your tenant. And so now your income goes from 200 to 1,000. So that's a great thing. And you got 10 or 20 of those, man, your income really, really goes up. The downside of renting is if something breaks, you got to fix it. You know, if it's a $6,000 AC system and you're making $200 a month, it's going to be a couple months before you're breaking even again. And so I don't like that component of it. The other component, it's a rental, you know, and renters, and forgive me, I mean, there are a lot of great renters out there, but renters don't take care of the property because it's a rental. You know, they really don't care if they don't take care of it. They just lose their deposit, which is typically just 1 month's rent. And so renters scare me sometimes because I'm afraid they're going to tear up my asset and I'm going to be stuck having to rebuild it. And then it's going to be that many more months before I'm profitable. So, but again, rent is a good exit strategy. It's just not for me. I like our two middle level. I like the rent to own and the in-house financing. This is why I like it. We're very passionate about home ownership. And when you're just renting, when your tenant is just renting, they're never going to own. We want to help people achieve home ownership. Home ownership is very important. You can actually transform a community, a city, a county, and the entire country through home ownership. Our path to home ownership provides pride of ownership. So we are very passionate about home ownership, and most people would rather own than rent. So America agrees with us. They want to own, they don't want to rent. So our two mid tiers, rent to own and in-house financing, we literally can transform that family, that person, that individual into home ownership, regardless of credit or financial past. So we're not credit based like the banks are. We're not credit based, we're buyer based. So let me restate that. We're not credit based, we're buyer based. What the buyer can comfortably afford to pay. And when you eliminate credit from the equation, it truly opens up homeownership to so many more deserving families. They don't have to qualify for a loan. They've got the money to afford the house. They deserve homeownership. And our rent to own and our in-house financing provides that opportunity of homeownership.
Mm. Brilliant model, man.
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for it. I'm just
Uh-huh.
regurgitating what I've learned and with a little bit of a spin to make it more personable and equitable and doable. And that's why we have clients and colleagues across the country effectively doing this successfully, which brings us a tremendous amount of joy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it turns out a joy to the homeowners who would otherwise never have an opportunity to become homeowners. And that's something that I definitely want to dive into. That was one of the aspects of this model that really drew me in, that it's not all about us creating wealth, but it's also about creating opportunities for people out there in the world.
Man, you know,
Yeah.
that is so true. That is so, I'm sorry for interrupting. I had this stall. And at 59 and a half, if I don't get it out now, I'm liable to forget it. But this is the thought. And I just lost my train of thought. That's what happens when you're 59.
This is the thought.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe it'll come back to me, and it is as gone can be at this moment. So we'll keep chatting, and if you see a spark in my eye, stop talking because I just remembered what it was.
I think you just had a textbook senior citizen moment.
Please don't say that out loud. Please edit that out of this
No,
conversation.
we were talking about the rent well, we're talking about the home ownership for these buyers that otherwise would not have the opportunity to become homeowners.
Hmm.
And then you're about to share a thought. Not
Yeah,
coming back?
that didn't help a bit. I'll tell you what, at 2 o'clock in the morning, when I wake up in the middle of the night, remember, I'll call you and we'll get back on. We'll get back. But it was really good. I mean, what I was about to share was really good. So I'll be anxious to get it out once it comes back.
And you know
Doggone.
what? On that note, we'll talk about that on the next episode. What do you think?
That'd give me plenty of time to see if I can recall.
That's a good one.
Yes, 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 yes,
All
yes.
right, Roger. Well, as always, it is a pleasure. talking to you, catching up with you, and just picking your brain, man.
Well, listen, it is my pleasure, man, because more people need to know about this model. This is truly a way that you can take this information and learn it and apply it and be proactive and mix it with desire and emotion. Guys, this information has the potential to completely change the trajectory of your life. And we're talking about a model that you can work part-time and create full-time income, or like me, you can work it full time and create generational wealth. And my wife and I just had our third grandchild a week ago today. So that generational wealth, the Bible, the word says, a righteous man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. And I want to fulfill that word. I want to glorify God and fulfill that word, but also provide for my family and my children's children. So this model can absolutely do that. It can absolutely change the trajectory of your life.
Love that, brother. All right. So until next time, everybody, stay tuned.
Thanks, Lorenzo. Appreciate the opportunity to speak and share. Okay.
All right. Okay. See you around.